Hello, children. So we are going to start Act Two of A Doll's House tomorrow, and I really just want to take today to kind of give you my big takeaways of Act One and just some major themes and moments that I think are worth paying attention to. As you'll notice, a lot of these do kind of correspond to the discussion questions. Because I wrote the discussion questions because these were the things I wanted you to pay attention to. So first thing I want to talk about is Nora and Torvald's relationship. Their relationship is really, really interesting. So first off, Ibsen intended his audience to view Nora and Torvald as a standard, typical middle-class couple, happily married middle-class couple. And if you look at their dynamic and the way they interact around and toward each other, there are a number of odd things, if not outright warning signs or red flags that you can kind of see on display. So first of all, let's talk about Nora and Nora's function in this relationship. So in this type of marriage during this time, as Ibsen depicts, Torvald is the breadwinner. Torvald is the provider. He goes out, he makes the money, and he's the father. He is the head of the household. He has final say over all the decisions, and he basically makes all the major decisions. Nora is a housewife, but it's not if you look at this, it's really not your typical type of housewife. It's not like what you would typically picture a housewife to be. Like when you hear housewife, I don't know, for me, I generally picture like June Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver, 1950s, like the stereotype of like the husband makes the money, goes out and works, and the wife takes care of the house, and basically working together, they get everything done. Nora is not like that because Nora does not really take care of the house because the maid takes care of the house. And Nora also doesn't really raise or mother the children. The nurse takes care of that. Nora's function instead is where you start to get a lot of, you start to see Ibsen's critique of gender roles, and in particular, marriage norms at this time. And to kind of give you an example of what I mean by this. So Torvald refers to Nora a couple times in Act One as a lark or a songbird. And that really is Nora's function in their relationship. She is the figurative songbird of the Helmer household. Her role is to brighten things up, liven the room, and look pretty. And when you understand that that's the way, basically her role in this relationship, whether or not either of them realize it or not, whether or not it's intentional, that is what her function is in this relationship. And when you understand that, a number of her character traits, at least for me, start to make sense. Like it makes sense why she's so vain and preoccupied with her looks, because a lot of the value that she brings to their marriage is based upon her looks. Hence why, again, she takes great pride in her looks and is really pretty vain. Again, she has a number of lines where she, either when she's talking about how her fantasy of the rich old man who fell in love with her because she's so beautiful and dies and leaves her all her money just because she's so pretty, or when she's talking about how Torvald never figured out that she bought cheap stuff and kept the other half of the money to start paying off her bond to Krogstad because she looks good in everything. So those lines make a bit more sense, and what her vanity makes a bit more sense when you start to understand that her role in this marriage is basically to be a trophy wife or somebody who just sits there and looks pretty and livens up the room. It also helps clarify, if you really pay attention to their dynamic, it helps clarify why Nora has some of the traits that she has and why she acts the way that she does, if you consider how Torvald treats her. So Torvald is very condescending and almost paternal towards Nora, which makes this a really, really weird relationship dynamic where it's almost like he treats her like she's a child, essentially. Again, he talks down to her, he lectures her all the time, he has a bunch of like rules put in place on what she's allowed to do. So like, for example, he doesn't allow her to eat sweets. And when viewing it through the context of Nora is treated like a child, her lack of being serious and her general just, I don't know, giddiness or just silliness and just just the fact that she's kind of flighty and not serious makes more sense, because she is essentially a child in terms of her mental capacity. Not that she's like dumb or idiot. Idiot. No, not that she's like dumb or anything, but rather that she's been treated like a child her entire life. She's never been in a situation or a position where she would have to grow up. And because of that, she never did grow up. So again, Nora's character traits are explained a little bit more or make a bit more sense about why she's like this when, at least for me, when I look at how Torvald encourages and reinforces certain behaviors. And even then, Nora acts like a child regarding Torvald's rules. So like Torvald says, like a parent, you can't have sweets, you can't have macaroons. Nora, like a child, sneaks them behind his back, and then when caught, lies about it. They're not mine. She gave them to me. Again, so it is a very interesting, at times uncomfortable dynamic to pay attention to, but it is that's definitely Ibsen's intent. It's definitely meant to be kind of annoying, if not a little off-putting, to have this husband treating his wife as basically a child and acting like, essentially playing the role of father for her. Wow, it sounds like it's raining. Let's see. And another example of their dynamic, that basically this paternal dynamic on display, is their conversation about money at the beginning, where Nora wants to go all out and spend all this money and have like the best Christmas ever, and Torvald is talking to her like, no, Nora, we have to be frugal, we have to be wise with our money because we can't do this and blah, 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 blah. So like Torvald is again lecturing her the way a parent or a father might lecture their child about why it's important to not spend all of your money right away, and why you need to save money when you need to save money for a rainy day. Okay. And you really start to see how they both buy into and really value this stereotype of the happy marriage, or at least presenting the appearance of having a happy marriage. And for the most part, both of them do seem to be legitimately happy together, and happy playing the roles that they are playing. Whether or not they realize or they're intending to play these roles is, I think, up for debate. But they're happy to do it. So I've mentioned that Nora never really grew up, and that puts her in stark contrast with Mrs. Lynde, who is a very different type of person than Nora is. Mrs. Lynde is a foil to Nora in the sense that they're both roughly the same age. They're friends from childhood. They went to school together. But Mrs. Lynde has had a very different type of life, and as a consequence, has a very different outlook on the world than Nora does. So whereas I've said Nora is very kind of carefree, not serious, and just kind of flighty. Mrs. Lind is very grounded, mature, and is a very serious person. And when you consider her background, it makes sense. I mean, again, she's a woman who intentionally married a man she didn't love and knew she was entering an unhappy marriage because she needed the money and her family needed the money. And then even after doing that, her husband dies and leaves her with nothing. It's and it puts her in the position of having to be the provider for her family. She has to now go out and work to provide and take care of her brothers and her mother. And it shows. She, unlike Nora, has definitely grown up because life has forced her to. Life has forced her to make these difficult decisions, and she's definitely got a more grounded and serious outlook on the world than Nora does. And you can kind of see that in the different things that they value. Again, Nora values the frivolity and is just, oh, it's so wonderful. I'm Torvald's wife, and I have my 3 doll children, and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lind is really just looking for a job. She doesn't have to take care of anyone anymore. Again, her mother's dead. Her brothers are established, but she wants to go back to work. She likes working and taking care of herself. So that's an interesting contrast that gets developed a bit more. Okay. Looking at and talking about the big secret that Nora keeps from Torvald. Nora keeps a number of secrets and lies to Torvald constantly, but the big one is I want to reiterate it and kind of go over it and review it because this is the bedrock of the entire story and what the conflict is based off of. So in the first year of their marriage, Torvald overworks himself to the point where he becomes extremely ill, and his doctors say he needs to go south. He needs to go south. He needs to go somewhere warm and take a nice long vacation to just relax and recover because he is exhausted. He's overworked himself. And the Helmers don't have the money to pay for that. And Nora's father is on death's door, and Nora does not feel that she can ask her dying father for money. So instead, she goes to Krogstad and basically gets a loan through Krogstad by committing fraud. Mrs. Lind mentions that at this time, a woman could not take out a bank loan without her husband's consent. So Nora goes to Krogstad and instead lies and commits fraud by making it out that her father is requesting the loan. And she forges her father's signature on the bond to get it approved, and Krogstad approves it, gives her the money, and whatever. However, she gets caught because she dated the bond on a date after her father was already dead. And basically, Krogstad sees that and starts to think that she forged his signature, and this is fraud, which it is. Nora has a rather interesting view towards this. She is very proud of having done this. She views this as I don't know. I kind of interpret this as she views this as, oh, see, I'm actually kind of smart. I did this thing without anybody realizing that I did this thing, and I managed to save my husband's life. So she's proud of it. She thinks it demonstrates her intelligence, her resourcefulness, her ability to I guess, navigate or make it in the world. And it shows that basically she takes pride in having done something for her husband. When in reality, she basically has put both of them in an extremely uncomfortable position because now Krogstad has the means to blackmail them, or if they're not going to go with that, take them to court and basically sue them for fraud. Which I think does say a lot about Nora as a person, that she doesn't think about, since her life in general has been so easy for her. Again, she grew up in a wealthy family and she married a pretty well-off guy. She's had a pretty easy life so far. So she's never really had to worry about the consequences of her actions before, and this is reality smacking her right in the face. And whereas Mrs. Lind is a foil to Nora, Krogstad is kind of a foil to Torvald as well. And Krogstad gets a lot more development later on in the play. But right off the bat, you do see that Krogstad is definitely trying to rebuild his reputation. Again, he committed fraud in the past, and he has a reputation for being just an unsavory person, and people generally don't like him and don't trust him. And he's trying to repair his relationship with the community, and his job at the bank is really important to him for doing that, to do that. Hence why he's willing to blackmail Nora to try and influence Torvald to not fire him. Alrighty, and I don't want to talk about Dr. Rank yet. I will just say Dr. Rank is an important character thematically and symbolically, and you don't really realize that yet. He also gets a lot more development later on in the play. So those are just some of my big takeaways from Act 1. The other two acts are much easier to get through. Again, Act 1, there's so much exposition, there's so much backstory. Acts 2 and 3 are a lot easier to get through. And I look forward to finishing this play with you guys.